Welcome to this SPT Dharma talk. And thank you for reminding me to put the recording on. So we'll just start again. So, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So welcome for joining, and thank you very much for joining this session. And I hope your practice is going well. But if you have any questions around practice or any questions around the sort of that I'm about to present, please feel free to ask them. And you can do that either verbally at the end when we invite questions, or you can send a question in a chat, and I'll try to incorporate the answer to that in what we're doing. Today we're going to look at the Upakkilesa Sutta, and the Kilesas are, if you like, the roots of all that distract us through the sankharas, and these can be summarized as simply greed, hatred, or ill will, and delusion. And greed would be the attachment we have to experience and sensory engagement. The ill will or hatred would be around our aversion to any experience. And delusion comes when we take this experience personally. And what does it mean to take it personally? Well, to make it me, mine, or my own. And when we do that, we turn whatever the experience is into an unwholesome one. And our task is to move away from the unwholesome to the wholesome. And the wholesome is quite straightforward in the teaching of Bhante Vimalaramsi. The wholesome is simply not taking experience personally. And the root of that is the application of the 6 R's. And the 6 R's are simply recognizing that we have taken something personally. In other words, we've got pulled away from our object of attention, whatever it is, perhaps in daily work or in our meditation. Recognizing that is re-establishing the mindfulness that we had lost. We release away from that distraction, so whatever is pulling us away, and we put energy into our practice to redirect our attention to the awareness of craving. And that manifests as tension or tightness inside our head, around our brain, or in other parts of our body. We relax that tension as best we can. We re-smile, which is generating a wholesome aspect of the practice compared to the unwholesome. And we return to the task in hand, be that the contemplation of loving kindness, or if we're using a breath meditation, our breath, or returning to the task in daily life. So this sutta is about the Upakkilesas. And Upa means close to the Kilesas. In other words, they're intimately related to the Kilesas. And it comes from the Majjhima Nikaya, and it's Majjhima Nikaya 1 to 6. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Kosambi, at Kasita's park. Now, on that occasion, the bhikkhus at Kosambi had taken to quarrelling and brawling, and were deep in disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers. So this is a almost chaotic scene that we're being presented with here. And all of the codes of behavior, the precepts and the codes of behavior for monastics have been disregarded. And they're caught up in their opinions and disparaging the opinions of others. Then with a certain bhikkhu went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he stood at one side and said, "Venerable sir, The bhikkhus here at Kosambi have taken to quarrelling and brawling and are deep in disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers. It would be good, Venerable Sir, if the Blessed One would go to those bhikkhus out of compassion. The Blessed One consented in silence. Then the Blessed One went to those bhikkhus and said to them, "Enough, bhikkhus, let there be no quarreling, brawling, wrangling, or dispute." When this was said, a certain bhikkhu said to the Blessed One, "Wait, Venerable Sir. Let the Blessed One, the Lord of the Dharma, live at ease, devoted to a pleasant abiding here and now." So what we have here is the Buddha expressing his opinion about what's going on and inviting these bhikkhus to change their behavior. Now, when this is the case, we would expect there to be an immediate response. Imagine the Buddha making a request. But what do we find? When this was said, a certain bhikkhu said to the Blessed One, "Wait, Venerable Sir. Let the Blessed One, the Lord of the Dharma, live at ease, devoted to a pleasant abiding here and now. We are the ones who will be responsible for this quarrelling, brawling, wrangling, and dispute." It's hard to imagine a more disrespectful response to the Buddha. But in spite of that, the Buddha, for a second time and for a third time, the Blessed One said, "Enough, bhikkhus, let there be no quarreling, brawling, wrangling, or dispute." And for a third time, that bhikkhu said to the Blessed One, "Wait, Venerable Sir. We are the ones who will be responsible for this quarreling, brawling, wrangling, and dispute." Now, there are many passages in the suttas where someone else approaches the Buddha with an urgent question in terms of their practice. And the Buddha may be doing something else. He may be about to leave for an alms round. And he says, "This is not the time for this." And yet the sense of urgency from that bhikkhu is such that they ask a second time. And the Buddha explains that it's still not the time. And then they ask a third. And the Buddha accepts that if something is asked for a third time, then he needs to respond. So even though he would have had a genuine reason not to engage with the dialogue at that time, because he doesn't want to inconvenience perhaps the people that he's going on alms round with by turning up late or whatever, he would then give a discourse in short, because he recognized perhaps the earnestness of the person inquiring. So 3 times, even the Buddha would adjust his behavior, if you like, to accommodate the request. But here, the quarreling bhikkhus do not. They again tell the Buddha to basically leave them to quarrel. And again, this is as disrespectful as it's possible to be. Then, when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, entered Kosambi for alms. And when he had wandered for alms in Kosambi and had returned from his alms round, after his meal, he set his resting place in order, took his bowl and outer robe, and while standing, uttered these stanzas. When many voices shout at once, none considers himself a fool. Though the Sangha is being split, none thinks himself at fault. They have forgotten thoughtful speech. They talk obsessed by words alone. Uncurbed, their mouths they bawl at will. None knows what leads him so to act. He abused me. He struck me. He defeated me. He robbed me. In those who harbor thoughts like these, hatred will never be allayed. He abused me. He struck me. He defeated me. He robbed me. In those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred will readily be allayed. But in this world, hatred is never allayed by further acts of hate. It is allayed by non-hatred. That is a fixed and ageless law. Those others who do not recognize that here we should restrain ourselves, but those wise ones who realize this at once end all their enmity. Breakers of bones and murderers, those who steal cattle, horses, wealth, those who pillage the entire realm. When even these can act together, why can you not do so too? So here we have some verses which are very familiar. And they're familiar because we recite them as part of the opening of each meditation day. And we recite them as they're expressed as part of the Dhammapada. And it's to remind us that when we're overcome by ill will and hatred, we lose all sense of balance and control in ourselves. So much so that the Buddha even compares the way we feel when we're like this to a band of robbers. Even a band of robbers are able to coordinate their behavior together for a common purpose. And yet, when we're overcome with ill will, anger, we're not able to see the common purpose. In this case, with the bhikkhus, the common purpose of their practice and why they've become bhikkhus, all of that is lost. And they're lost in the opinion and views of their own ideas. And so instead of wanting to come to a sense of balance and finding, if you like, the right balance, all that's of concern here is that they should individually win. So when winning becomes paramount, we end up being deaf. If one can find a worthy friend, a virtuous, steadfast companion, then overcome all threats of danger and walk with him content and mindful. So a worthy friend, a kalyanamita. The Buddha, when asked by Ananda, or when he heard Ananda state that a good friend, a kalyanamita, was half of the holy life, the Buddha said, don't say so, Ananda, don't say so. Kalyanamita, a good friend, is the whole of the holy life. So this is how much importance there is in finding companionship on the way. But it's not always possible. But if one finds no worthy friend, no virtuous, steadfast companion, and virtuous here, it means someone who is keeping the precepts, sila, then as a king leaves his conquered realm, walk like a tusker, like an elephant, in the woods alone. Better it is to walk alone. There is no companionship with fools. Walk alone and do no evil. at ease, like a tusker in the woods. Then, having uttered these stanzas while standing, the Blessed One went to the village of Kalanakara. On that occasion, the Venerable Bhagu was living in that village. When the Venerable Bhagu saw the Blessed One coming in the distance, he prepared a seat and set out water for washing the feet. The Blessed One sat down on the seat, made ready, and washed his feet. The Venerable Bhagu paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down at one side. And the Blessed One said to him, I hope you are keeping well, Bhikkhu. I hope you are comfortable. I hope you are not having any trouble getting alms food. I am keeping well, Blessed One. I am comfortable, and I am not having any trouble getting alms food. Then the Blessed One instructed, urged, roused, and gladdened the Venerable Bhagu with talk on the Dharma, after which he rose from his seat and went to the eastern bamboo park. Now, on that occasion, the Venerable Anuruddha, the Venerable Nandiya, and the Venerable Kimbila were living at the eastern bamboo park. The park keeper saw the Blessed One coming in the distance and told him, do not enter this park, recluse. There are 3 clansmen here seeking their own good. Do not disturb. The Venerable Anuruddha heard the park keeper speaking to the Blessed One and told him, friend, park keeper, do not keep the Blessed One out. It is our teacher, the Blessed One, who has come. Then the Venerable Anuruddha went to the Venerable Nandiya and the Venerable Kimbila and said, come out, Venerable Sirs, come out. Our teacher, the Blessed One, has come. Then all 3 went out to meet the Blessed One. One took his bowl and outer robe, one prepared a seat, and one set out water for washing the feet. The Blessed One sat down on the seat, made ready, and washed his feet. Then those 3 Venerable Ones paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down at one side. And the Blessed One said to them, I hope you are all keeping well, Anuruddha. I hope you are comfortable. I hope you are not having any trouble getting alms food. So here we have 2 examples with Venerable Bhagu, with the Venerable Bhagu and then with Anuruddha and his companions, about how to welcome and pay respect to the Buddha. And this is in contrast to the group of monks earlier. Anuruddha replied, we are keeping well, Blessed One. We are comfortable. We are not having any trouble getting alms food. I hope, Anuruddha, that you are all living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. Surely, Venerable Sir, we are living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. But Anuruddha, how do you live thus? Venerable Sir, as to that, I think thus. It is a gain for me, it is a great gain for me that I am living with such companions in the holy life. I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards these venerable ones, both openly and privately. So this sense of loving kindness is imbuing everything, not just the things that are overt and demonstrated, but even the things that are not seen. So here's the loving kindness that is imbuing thoughts, speech, and action. I maintain verbal acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. I consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do. We are different in body, Venerable Sir, but one in mind. So here's a practical demonstration of what's often described as an aspect of practice, which is no preference, not having preferences, not having opinions about how things should be. The Venerable Nandiya and the Venerable Kimbila each spoke likewise, adding, "That is how, Venerable Sir, we are living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes." Good, good, Anuruddha. I hope that you all abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. Surely, Venerable Sir, we abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. But Anuruddha, how do you abide thus? Venerable Sir, as to that, whichever of us returns first from the village with alms food, prepares the seats, sets out the water for drinking and for washing, and puts the refuse bucket in its place. Whichever of us returns, returns last, eats any food left over, if he wishes. Otherwise, he throws it away where there is no greenery, or drops it into water where there is no life. He puts away the seats and the water for drinking and for washing. He puts away the refuse bucket after washing it, and he sweeps out the refectory. Whoever notices that the pots of water for drinking, washing, or the latrine are low or empty, takes care of them. If they are too heavy for him, he calls someone else by a signal of the hand, and they move it by joining hands. But because of this, we do not break out into speech. But every 5 days, we sit together all night discussing the Dharma. That is how we abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. So here's a very good example of why in a retreat, we're requested to have noble silence. By doing so, we immediately begin to allay one aspect of expression through the sankharas. So thought still remains with us, but speech, if we don't speak, this remains silent. And then action. Well, here we see that action is entirely cooperative. It's not an expression of a selfish perspective. So we can see perhaps here a blueprint for how we should choose to engage during any retreat, but also in our practice, and how we should relate to others, simply saying what needs to be said, but not imbibing in gossip or slander or backbiting or lying. These are all forms of speech which are unhelpful. Good, good, Anuruddha. But while you abide thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, have you attained any superhuman states, a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, a comfortable abiding? So the Buddha's impressed with the outward arrangements that they've made, but he's very keen to know, has this supported any inner development? Because from the Buddha's perspective, it's the inner growth which is the purpose of the holy life. So Anuruddha replies, Venerable Sir, as we abide here, diligent, ardent, and resolute, we perceive both light and a vision of forms. Soon afterwards, the light and the vision of forms disappear, but we have not discovered the cause for that. So there are a couple possible interpretations of this passage. We can think of the light as the natural radiance, perhaps, that is cultivated when people practicing achieve increasingly sublime states. And the vision of forms might be a projection of imagery, which might come from perhaps kasina practices. But there's also another reference, which is very interesting. And it works with the translation in a slightly different context, which I think is sometimes very helpful. And this comes from the Patisambhida Magga, which is part of the Khandaka, and that's one of the Nikayas. And it's from the 73 knowledges. And what it says is that the wisdom there is from the state of insight into the signs of variability and unity in forms through illumination. The wisdom there is from the state of insight into the signs of variability or variation and unity in forms through illumination. So the illumination is the light. So if you like, that's the awareness that we've developed. And seeing the variability and unity of forms is the vision and understanding of forms. So here we've got the object of meditation, which is presenting, which is the form, and the light is the awareness we cultivate. So one way we can look at this passage is to say that Aniruddha is experiencing the development of awareness, and then the insight into the nature of the meditation object. But then that falls away. And the three monks don't understand why. So the Buddha responds, you should discover the cause for that, Aniruddha. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too perceived both light and the vision of forms. Soon afterwards, the light and the vision of forms disappeared. I thought, what is the cause and condition why the light and vision of forms have disappeared? Then I considered thus, doubt arose in me. And because of doubt, my concentration fell away. When my concentration, or collectedness as we would describe, fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that doubt does not arise in me again. So doubt is one of the hindrances. And doubt can be very pervasive in our practice. It can be doubt in the veracity of the teaching. Perhaps we haven't had the progress in our practice that we anticipated or expected or recognized. And so we wonder whether the teaching's correct. Or we might have doubt in our capacity to follow the teaching, not thinking that we're capable of developing these changes in perspective and experience. And so when doubt arises, that is enough to allow our collected mind to begin to disappear. And with the collectedness disappearing, so the awareness and the insight into forms also disappears. So the Buddha says, I shall so act that doubt will not arise in me again. So this is seemingly easy to say, but how else we go about it? Well, this is where we're very fortunate in the guidance that we receive from Bhante Brahmaramsi, Sister Kema, Bhikkhu Dharma Kavesi. This is the purpose of the 6 R's. We're looking to develop the attention that allows us to see when our mind moves away from the object of attention. And remember, the loving kindness is not the object of inquiry. We're not trying to look for understanding in the loving kindness itself. The loving kindness is simply the anchor. And we're interested in how the mind moves away from the loving kindness and what causes that and what we need to do to bring it back. So in this case, the Buddha is describing arising. So there's been some sensory contact, perhaps a thought. And because of that thought, an unpleasant feeling arises in the mind. With that unpleasant feeling comes the I don't like it mind. And the I don't like it mind then generates a story, feeds into a story about why we don't like it. And this is clinging. And then from that, we get into the habitual responses. So as we move through those, the doubt builds. And as it builds, it becomes almost self-feeding. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to recognize when the mind has become distracted. And we're very fortunate here because one of the things that is really wonderful about the twin meditation approach is the simplicity in the description of right effort. Right effort is embraced through the 6 R's. Recognizing our mind has been distracted. We make the effort, put in energy to release away from that distraction by choosing to redirect our mind to an awareness of the tension and tightness we feel around our brain and in the rest of our body in different parts. We soften that tension. So this is the first of 2 stages of right effort. The recognizing, the releasing, and the relaxing of this tension. This is the purification of the mind. It's releasing away from the unwholesome that has dragged us away. And remember, the unwholesome is not a judgment about good and bad. Whatever it is that we've experiencing, it's not saying it's bad that makes it unwholesome. No. The unwholesome is related entirely to the fact that we've taken whatever the experience is, which might be a pleasant experience or not, personally. We've tried to make it part of ourselves or identify with it or use it to confirm that we are. All of those will lead us to a state of dukkha. If it's something we enjoy, the dukkha will be the fear of it disappearing. But everything is anicca. Everything is impermanent. If it's something we hate or dislike, we'll fear it won't disappear. And equally dukkha occurs. So, the purifying of the mind is to release away from the attachment or aversion to that experience. And that's the first 3 steps. The recognizing our mind has moved, the releasing away from it, and the relaxing of tension around our brain and in the rest of our body. Then comes the purification. It's an essential part of right effort. It's the second half of what we need to do. So we need to re-smile. Why? Because we've just released an unwholesome state of mind and we need to fill the vacuum with a wholesome state. Having filled the vacuum with a wholesome state, we then need to persist and allow that wholesome state to stay going. And so we come back to our loving kindness, and whether that is the loving kindness in our practice or whether it is the loving kindness that we project out outwardly and privately, in all aspects, as Anuruddha was describing. So these are the 4 steps of right effort. Recognizing there's an unwholesome state, releasing away from the unwholesome state, allowing a wholesome state to come up, and cultivating the circumstances for that to persist. As Anuruddha, I was abiding, diligent, ardent, and resolute. I perceived both light and vision of forms. Soon afterwards, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I thought, what is the cause and condition why the light and vision of forms have disappeared? Then I considered, thus, inattention arose in me. And because of inattention, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention will arise in me again. So, inattention, the mind beginning to drift away from the object of attention. Now, this can happen for a number of reasons. It can happen because we're putting too much effort in. It can happen because we're putting too little in. And one of the things that helps us with inattention is balancing the factors of awakening. So this is balancing on the one side, the sense of joy that comes from a mind that is naturally beginning to be collected around an object. So we need to make the energy and effort to observe the object of attention. This then immediately causes us to be investigating what's going on, and we'll notice our mind wanting to move away. And this is the investigation of states, and that's good. But it's good in the sense of noticing that's a tendency of mind that we need to be aware of, not to get over-involved in these states. So there might be a thought or an image or a sensation in the body. And when we allow our attention, investigation, and our application to work like this, then we begin to feel aspects of joy. And we begin to feel that as we begin to move through the early jhanas. So this is around the energy and effort that we make. But on the other side, we also need to balance this so that it doesn't get out of hand. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit more restless. And so how we balance it is working with tranquility, working with collectedness of mind, and with equanimity. And what keeps all of that in balance is the awareness of movements of mind, the mindfulness. And so our inattention is like a balancing act. And we'll come on to more of that as we go through the sutta. So recognizing inattention, again, we 6R because in the 6Ring, we have all the 7 factors of awakening. So if we notice our mind has drifted away from the object of attention, that knowing is mindfulness, the first thing that we need to establish to bring the factors of awakening together. Then we redirect our mind. And in order to do that, we need to make an effort. Well, this is putting energy into the practice. So we've got the mindfulness, if you like, is the pivot on the seesaw. We have energy. So the energy of redirecting our mind. Then we need to balance something on the other side of the seesaw. And that's the relaxing of the tension around our brain. That's the tranquility. So here we are. Okay. And the whole process is governed by investigating the states, because That was what first triggered our awareness in the mindfulness. So the investigation is there. We then re-smile. That's the joy. Our collected mind is re-established. So this balances out the factors of awakening. And we return back to the object of attention. And if we do that every time our mind is disturbed, then we're not getting pulled out of balance by that disturbance. So that's an expression of developing equanimity. So we see that all the factors of awakening are present in the 6R process. As Anuruddha, I was abiding, diligent. I considered thus sloth and torpor arose in me. And because of sloth and torpor, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention nor sloth and torpor will arise in me again. So the sloth and torpor is that sluggishness of mind. It's the mind that feels unable or unwilling to make an effort. And it's important to recognize the difference between sloth and torpor and tiredness. Tiredness, if it's there, needs rest. If we persist in trying to meditate when we're tired, we're not going to have the results that the practice can bring. And this is why whenever we have a twin retreat, all of the time, we encourage sufficient rest through the day, through the evening, through the night. So that when you come to your practice, you have a balance of energy and brightness in the mind. And this is really important to see. And certainly in the past, I've been on meditation retreats which have artificially reduced the amount of time of sleep down to 4 hours, down to 3, sometimes even down to 2. And for me personally, these were just utterly exhausting. And it makes it much, much harder to sustain the balance of awareness required for the practice. So sloth and torpor is a state of mind. It's a hindrance. And it responds to interest, to energy. So it responds to raising the energy. And remember, when we were talking about the factors of enlightenment, the energetic side is about the effort and the energy we put in, the investigation of states, and the joy that comes from that. So to help counterbalance sloth and torpor, we need more curiosity. It's like, this feeling is here right now. Looking at this state, looking at how it's expressed in the body, looking at how it feels, recognizing it's present. And then with that recognition, then 6Ring and coming back to the practice. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent. I considered thus, fear arose in me. And because of fear, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, light and vision of forms disappeared. Suppose a man set out on a journey and murderers leaped out on both sides of him. Then fear would arise in him because of that. So too, fear arose in me, and the light and vision of forms disappeared. I considered thus, I shall so act that neither doubt, nor inattention, nor sloth and torpor, nor fear will arise in me again. So fear, this can be the fear of many different things. It can be whether we can spend the amount of time that we've got doing
our practice or our retreat when there are other calls and demands on us. It can be fear about whether our career is what we want, or whether our financial situation is able to sustain our lives. It can be fear around if we were meditating outside and it was getting dark, the sounds in the woods or the forest. Fear can arise at many, many different levels. And one of the things that we need to be able to do with fear is to recognize that the fear itself comes from me. Because the fear being described here is not outward manifestations. It's not that we're being directly threatened, but that we're constructing something within ourselves from our thoughts, from our beliefs, from the images in our own minds, basically from our sankharas. And so one of the things that Bhante Viramsci describes about working with fear would be to simply stay still. And he describes an incident in his own practice where this occurred, where he was out in the forest, and he was in a part of the country and a monastery where they had a strong belief in ghosts. And he was meditating at night, and he started to see lights in the corners of his eyes in the forest. And he could feel fear arise, and he just stood still, staying with the feeling, 6Ring. And as he did that, things became a little bit clearer, and he suddenly realized that what he saw were not ghosts, but simply fireflies. And of course, as soon as that awareness is there, the fear disappears immediately. And there are other examples of this, of in a poorly lit room, of seeing a snake on the floor, and then there being a flash of lightning and realizing the snake on the floor is simply a piece of rope. So it's not that our fear is misplaced, but it's that we've misunderstood. And one of the things that we need to understand is that it's not that fear of snakes is inappropriate, but that what our mind has created on an assumption from within ourselves. And so much of the fears that we feel in life are these that are created from within us. And so we need to recognize when our mind has got caught up with fear. And again, what is the antidote for this? The 6 Rs. Recognizing that's happened, releasing away from that state of mind, relaxing the aversion that's expressed by tension and tightness around our brain and in our body. Softly smiling and coming back. And if it's fear, it's also helpful to have an inner laugh. In fact, Bhante Viramsci often would say that whenever you find your mind, any distraction, laughing is very helpful. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent. I considered thus elation arose in me, and because of elation, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. Suppose a man seeking one entrance to a hidden treasure came all at once upon 5 entrances to a hidden treasure. Then elation would arise in him because of that. So too, elation arose in me. The light and vision of forms disappeared, and I considered thus, I shall act that neither doubt nor inattention, nor sloth and torpor, nor fear, nor elation will arise in me. So this elation, well, one of the natural aspects of beginning to work through the early jhanas is that a joy comes, a confidence, a joy. And this is a very pleasurable state. But we have to be very careful here because we have certain factors which are present in each of the jhanas. And if we're not careful, our mind will turn towards these factors and turn our concentration on them, making them the object of our attention. So if we do this with the joy can grow. But we're not going to move then through the natural progression with the Brahma Viharas. We've taken one of the factors of jhana as our point of concentration, rather than simply allowing them to be there as a consequence of our passage through the jhanas. So when we become familiar with the factors of the jhanas, just allow them to arise and they will disappear. And some of them are pleasant and we can feel sorry that they've disappeared. And Sister Kima would often describe to me when she was working with students that sometimes they would come in to report their progress and they would have a long face. And she said, well, what's going on? And they would go, well, the loving kindness has disappeared. It's no longer there. And the joy that the loving kindness had brought is something that they've become kind of attached to. And so when it began to disappear, they were upset. But the natural progression of the Brahma Viharas, from loving kindness through to compassion and then through to sympathetic joy, means that the joy of loving kindness will disappear, but it's replaced by the emergence of compassion. And this has a particular experience in the practice, and the object of attention changes as this moves. And this is why we need to recognize that the Brahma Viharas are not the focus of our attention. They are simply the anchor of our mind. And we need to allow them to gradually move and change. If we get caught up in one particular experience because it's very pleasant or because it's unexpected and enjoyable, or it represents something that we felt absent in our lives or in our practice in the past, then we become stuck. We become stuck in the jhanas. We lose this flow. And then we need to remind ourselves that that's what's happened. And we 6R, and we come back into the flow of the practice again. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, I considered thus inertia arose in me. And because of inertia, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and visions of forms disappeared. And so I decided, I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention, nor all the other things that we've been discussing, nor elation, nor inertia will arise in me again. So inertia here is that sense of heaviness, that sense of dullness. So this is one of the aspects of sloth and torpor, for instance. It's an absence of energy. It has a static quality. And the thing that we need to remember about working with the practice, the twin practice, is that it's an energetic practice. Not an energetic practice like doing a workout in a gym, but there's a vibrancy to the practice in all of the states. It's an energetic practice. It's not dull. It's not heavy. It's not dead. So if we experience that in our practice, we need to recognize it. And having recognized it, we release away from it, relax the tension, tightness, smile, come back. And sometimes this sense of inertia can be a little persistent. So we need to just increase our energy and inquiry about that, our investigation into it. We might need to stand up and do some walking meditation if if we've sat for, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes or whatever, and this state is not released. And just move with meditation to build a little bit more energy into our practice. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, I considered thus, excess energy arose in me, and because of excess energy, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and the vision of forms disappeared. Suppose a man were to grip a quail tightly with both hands. It would die then and there. So too, an excess of energy arose in me. The light and vision of forms disappeared. I considered thus, I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention, nor inertia, nor excess of energy will arise in me again. So, excessive energy. This is the restlessness in the mind. And if we have too much restlessness, too much energy, it's like the mind is bouncing around, looking for things. And what we need to develop there is the factors of awakening, of tranquility, collectedness, and equanimity. So simply bringing our intention towards tranquility is helpful itself. Inclining our mind in that direction, away from the restlessness. So restlessness is one of the hindrances. And restlessness in its most subtle forms will remain with us right through until the final understanding that comes with developing the knowledge of an arahant. So having a relationship to restlessness is a very important part of the practice. And again, not taking it personally. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, I considered thus deficiency of energy arose in me. And because of deficiency of energy, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. Suppose a man were to grip a quail loosely, it would fly out of his hands. So too, a deficiency of energy arose in me. The light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention nor excess of energy or deficiency of energy will arise in me again. So for me, my understanding here is that this is where we develop, if you like, too much calm. We're too relaxed. We don't necessarily have an inertia. There isn't that heaviness, but there isn't that energetic brightness that accompanies the practice. If you like, we've taken our foot off the pedal. We're beginning to freewheel in the practice a little. And as a consequence, we relax our hands and the quail flies off. So we need to just gently rebalance. Too much calm. The tranquility, the collectedness, the equanimity is in excess of the energy, the investigation, and the joy. So we need to apply a little bit more energy, be curious about that state of being, the fact that we're, in that state of calm. And again, it's the intention we set in the mind which helps redress this balance. It's not that we have to cultivate more interest as a sort of commodity. It's just that we need to recognize that interest isn't there. And then set an intention towards it to help this begin to balance out. Anuruddha, as I was abiding diligent, I considered thus, longing arose in me, and because of that longing, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt nor inattention nor deficiency of energy and all the other states nor longing will arise in me again. Well, we've probably all identified with that sense of longing. That's the innate desire we have to make progress in our practice. But as soon as we have the desire to make progress, we already moved away from the practice itself. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have good intention, chanda, good effort to sit down. We need this chanda to make the effort to apply ourselves. But having decided to do that, our task is very simple. In fact, it's disarmingly simple. Our task is simply to observe states of mind. So we make the effort to generate the loving kindness to start with, and then we stay with that feeling. Not in a gripped way, like holding onto the quail too tightly, not in a lax way, like letting the quail fly away, but in a balanced way. And our task is to observe that state, to see it as it is and as it changes, not to hold on to it in a particular form or representation or presentation, but simply to be with it. And when we are with it, then we can observe when we're not with it. And in seeing the mind move away, that is the invitation to use right effort, the 6 R's, to bring ourselves back. So here, if we have longing, then the longing is basically saying, I don't want to be where I am. I want to be somewhere else. And the practice is all about turning up to where you are right now. So we can get caught up in the idea that surely I need to set a direction. Surely I need to have an intention about where I want to go. But if we work simply with the observation, one of the beautiful things around the twin meditation is the natural evolution through the Brahma Viharas, through the factors of the jhanas. And if we allow this to evolve on its own, then we recognize that these states come to be, they persist for a while, and then they change and disappear. And so by allowing that to happen and simply to observe it, we are getting this continuous training in anatta, that we don't have control over these things. They simply evolve in their own way. And so when we allow ourselves to observe this, we're constantly being reminded of that aspect of the teaching. We see the impermanence because they arise. So in the first jhana, we have the factor of vitakka and vichara, initial and sustained thinking, this way of the mind engaging with the practice, and in a verbalized thinking way. And then as we move into the second jhana, we notice that drops away. So we see that this has arisen and then it disappears. And so all the way through the jhanas, we're gradually seeing different factors disappearing, ceasing. And so we can see that the actual progress through the practice is really one of cessation and the awareness of cessation as we develop. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, I considered thus, perception of diversity arose in me. And because of perception of diversity, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt, nor inattention, nor all the other states, nor longing, nor perception of diversity will arise in me again. So perceptions of diversity, this is a distracted mind. And what we want to do is bring back the unification of mind, ekaggata, this unification of mind, which is the collectedness that is the aspect of concentration that we bring to the practice. So when we see the mind is scattered, we bring it back. The method, again, the 6 R's. As an Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, I considered thus, excessive meditation on forms arose in me. And because of excessive meditation on forms, my concentration fell away. When my concentration fell away, the light and vision of forms disappeared. I shall so act that neither doubt, nor inattention, nor perception of diversity, nor excessive meditation on forms will arise on me again, in me again. So, what is an excessive meditation on forms? Well, if we recognize the description of forms that I was talking about right at the start of the sutta, then the forms are our meditation objects. So if there's an excessive meditation on forms, what we're doing is we're moving from the collected mind more to a single-pointed aspect of mind. We're taking the form as the object of attention. And when we do that, then we lose this wider peripheral awareness, which is the awareness and seeing through the meditation object, the nature of reality. So things arising and ceasing, the changeability, the impact of conditionality. So when we get over involved with what's in the mind, all of that closes down. But once we recognize we've done that, the 6 R's again invite us to open back up. When Anuruddha, I understood that doubt is an imperfection of the mind. I abandoned doubt. And when I understood that inattention, sloth and torpor, fear, elation, inertia, excess of energy, deficiency of energy, longing, perception of diversity, excessive meditation upon forms is an imperfection of the mind, I abandoned these. As Anuruddha, I was abiding, diligent, ardent, and resolute. So this is a description of practice. Diligent. Understanding why we're practicing and applying that understanding. Ardent, creating the energy to do so from the heart. And resolute, being persistent in our practice. When I was abiding diligent, ardent, and resolute, I perceived light, but I did not perceive forms. I saw forms, but I did not perceive light, even for a whole night or a whole day or for a whole day and night. I thought, what is the condition and cause for this? Then I considered thus, on the occasion when I do not attend to the sign of forms, but attend to the sign of light, then I perceive light, but I do not perceive forms. So when I'm concentrating on light, what is happening here? Well, we're aware, but we haven't landed our awareness with our anchor. So we're kind of aware of all things going on, as it were, not bringing our attention back. When And then I considered, on the occasion when I do not attend to the sign of forms, but attend to the sign of light, then I perceive light and not forms. Okay? And so that's the awareness. But when I only see forms, then I'm just staying overly concentrated on the actual object itself. So this is a description of this balance. It's like the tuning of the lute that the Buddha described. How do we tune the lute so that the strings are neither too tight nor too loose? On the occasion when I do not attend to the sign of light, but attend to the sign of forms, I then see forms, but I do not perceive light. So there's no awareness, even for a whole day or night and a day, or a day and a night. As Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, ardent, and resolute. I perceived limited light and saw limited forms. I perceived immeasurable light and saw immeasurable forms. Even for a whole night or a whole day or a whole night and day, and I thought, what is the cause and condition of this? Then I considered thus, on the occasion when concentration is limited, we would say collectedness. Collectedness is limited. My vision is limited. And with limited vision, I perceive limited light and limited forms. Well, the important thing here is to understand perhaps the meaning of immeasurable. If we think of the progression through the jhanas, the early jhanas are not immeasurable. Immeasurable would be perhaps a word that would describe infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness. These are boundaryless states, immeasurable. So here, when the collectedness is not fully developed, then we're staying in the early jhanas. But on occasion when collectedness is immeasurable, my vision is immeasurable. And with immeasurable vision, I perceive immeasurable light and see immeasurable forms, even for a whole night or a day, whole day or a whole day and night. So these would be the arupa jhanas, the immeasurable, infinite space, infinite consciousness, and moving into aspects of nothingness. When Anuruddha, I understood that doubt is an imperfection of the mind, and had abandoned doubt, an imperfection of the mind. When I understood that inattention is an imperfection of mind, and abandoned inattention, abandoned sloth and torpor, abandoned fear, abandoned elation, abandoned inertia, abandoned excess of energy, abandoned deficiency of energy, abandoned longing, abandoned perception of this diversity, abandoned excess meditation upon forms, an imperfection of the mind, then I thought, I have abandoned those imperfections of the mind, the Upakkilesas. Let me now develop collectedness in 3 ways. Thereupon, I developed concentration or collectedness with applied thought and sustained thought. So initial thought and sustained thought. I developed collectedness without applied thought, but with sustained thought. I developed collectedness without applied thought and without sustained thought. I developed concentration with rapture. I developed concentration without rapture. I developed concentration accompanied by enjoyment. I developed concentration accompanied by equanimity. So here we have the factors of the jhanas, gradually working through those factors, each one dropping away and the next one appearing. When Anuruddha, I had developed concentration with applied and sustained thought, when I had developed all of the other factors going through, ending with the concentration accompanied by equanimity, the knowledge and vision arose in me. My deliverance is unshakable. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewal of being. That is what the Blessed One said, and the Venerable Anuruddha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that's the end of the Upakkilesa Sutta. Let's just take a few moments just to collect our own mind. So sit comfortably. Softly rotate your inner thighs towards the midline. So this allows you to release the tension in your hips, to open up your sacrum, to free up your spine. Drop the inner edge of your shoulder blades to release the tension around your heart, so you create space in all directions around your heart. Softly smile and you'll notice your neck releases. Relax any holding and bracing around your brain. Allow your spine to become free and in balance. And then if you're working with the 6 directions, simply continue your practice. If you're working with a spiritual friend, bring to mind a time when you felt joyful and happy. And allow that feeling of joyfulness and happiness to be present in you. And softly allow the memory to just move into the background. Don't hold on to it. Stay with the feeling of loving kindness. And say to yourself, may I be well, may I be joyful, may I be happy. And allow that feeling of happiness, however it's expressed in you. It might be a warm, glowing feeling in your heart. It might be simply a soft smile in recognition of the memory. Or anything else in between. But whatever it is, you recognize that this is the joyfulness of that memory. Now bring your attention to the contact with the ground. Softly smile. Take a deliberate breath in. And gently open your eyes. Are there any questions or comments around what we've been talking about today and presenting today? Or any questions or requests around practice? Ah, Sachin.
Hello, sir.
Good to see you.
How are
Yes,
you,
I'm very well, thank you.
sir? Just I got one doubt in my mind.
Mhm,
This is regarding about purification of mind.
mhm.
The purification of mind continues till we reach Arahant. This is correct, sir?
Yes, the process of purification continues. It becomes more and more subtle in the different stages. But the final fetters, if you like, that are released at the stage of arahatship are a further purification of mind. So this process continues all the way through.
Oh, okay. Even after reaching Arahant stage, it will continue, sir.
Once you release arahant stage, then your actions no longer create karma. Your actions create what's called kirya, and kirya has no karmic resonance to it. So there's no further propagation of karma, but you are still subject to past karma. And with past karma, you may still have the consequences of past actions, and they may be experienced in your life. Indeed, the demise of Moggallana, who was brutally murdered, was the consequence in the suttas, described as a consequence of past karma in his previous life. And the nature of his death mimicked the death that he inflicted upon his own blind parents when he beat them to death in a past life. And the back pain that the Buddha suffered was described as the consequence of the fact that in a past life he had been a wrestler, and the way he had defeated his opponents was to lift them up and break their back. And so the Suttas describe this as a karmic consequence of this. So we don't escape our past karma, but we move to a place where we're not generating anymore.
Thank you, sir.
All right, pleasure. Any other questions?
A comment to make on this sutta.
Please do.
So Bhante also uses this sutta as an example of using intuition, like what the Buddha was doing, or Bodhisattva was doing, was asking a question of what is the thing which is happening, and then letting the intuition come for the solution. So Bhante also gave this sutta as an example of using intuition in meditation. So asking yourself the question, why is this happening? Or why am I prone to kind of restlessness? Or why am I prone to kind of sloth and torpor? You can ask that question and let the answer come. So this is a sutta which is kind of used for example for that also. So
that's a wonderful addition. Yes, indeed, and I think we're often confused about how to use intuition. So I think that's Bhante is a lovely example of how we can do that. So yes, thank you. I think that's a great addition.
With a good sutta reading, I think it was very nice. Please ask questions if there are questions not related to the sutta also, like for meditation or something like that. Please ask the question.
I think another question has come up in the chat.
Okay.
How are the kilesas different to the hindrances? Well, the kilesas themselves are greed, hatred, and delusion. And so if you like, they are the root cause of many other manifestations. And one of the other manifestations are the hindrances. The other manifestations are, as in this sutta, the Upakkilesas, the things that are close to the kilesas. So, if you like, these root kilesas feed into these other aspects. So, if you like, the hindrances exist because the kilesas are present, and they are, if you like, a wider description of the consequences of the kilesas. So, the greed is our attachment to sensory experience, which is perhaps the first of the hindrances. Our hatred is the aversion or the ill will, which might be the second of the hindrances. And then the third kilesa is delusion. So, and delusion is, if you like, when we get confused about what is wholesome and what is not wholesome. And some of that confusion can fuel restlessness and anxiety because we've attached to experience personally. And this is a way of fueling these aspects of the hindrances. The doubt, again, is our attachment to our personal understanding, and not recognizing perhaps that we simply need to observe. And so our doubt is when we move away from the practice into trying to perhaps rationalize what's going on, rather than simply stay with the observation and the knowledge that comes from that. Would you like to add anything in particular here, Bhante?
One thing about thing is that, as you said, that those are kind of related, and as in this sutta also, it is showing certain hindrances which are not coming at the standard 5 hindrances, as you said, the Upakkilesa sutta. So but Bhante Vimalaramsi gave a very kind of a simple kind of a formula for that. What is a hindrance? Whatever hinders you from your doing your task of meditation. So whatever comes across. So certain times a wholesome thought may be there. I want to kind of give a solution for the world hunger. That may be there also, but you can kind of say that keep it aside after the meditation. I'll put attention on it. So whatever hinders in your meditation, that can be considered as hindrance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat rather than come on camera if you prefer.
I think no more questions. We can share the merits.
Let me see if I can just bring that up. Apologies a moment. I'm having a little difficulty. Okay, so just going to share this screen. Okay. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, savers and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours.
May
May
they
they
long protect
protect
the
the
Buddha's
Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, sir.
Back to
Thank you,
Krishna,
Bante.
thank you.
Uh,
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Bande.
Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for coming, everybody. Okay, bye.
Bye now.
Bye.